Howdy, I'm Tom Church. I'm a policy fellow at the Hoover Institution, and today I'm trying to figure out why some states call their results the night of a presidential election and other states cannot. So to figure out this question, I'm talking to Ben Ginsberg. Ben, thanks for chatting with me today.
Tom, great to be here. Thanks.
So you have a bunch of titles. I'm just going to try and get them right without reading them. So one, here at Hoover, you are the Volcker Distinguished Visiting Fellow, right? You are the co-chair of EOLDN, which is the Election Officials Legal Defense Network.
Yes.
It's a great organization. And you're also the host of Saints, Sinners, and Salvageables, which is a great podcast on election-related issues.
Thank you. Through Hoover.
Through Hoover, that's right, yeah. So this question of how some states are able to call elections, on that presidential night and others are not, I think of Florida as getting its act together. And I'm really talking to you because you were tangentially involved in the 2000 election and how Florida might have changed things. Tell me about that.
Well, 2000, I was general counsel to the Bush campaign. So I was there for a good 36 days from 10:30 on Wednesday morning till the last ballot was counted and the Supreme Court had ruled.
Wow. And were you involved in the actual litigation in front of the Supreme Court?
I was. I helped write the brief, helped muster the lawyers, and sort of played a liaison role between what was happening in the counting houses in all of Florida's counties with what the legal team was producing.
Right, so you're at least familiar with, Florida's old rules and maybe the new one.
It's changed a lot.
It's changed a lot. Well, we'll go over that. So I'm also talking to you because you co-authored a piece with Bruce Cain titled Restoring Confidence in American Elections for Hoover's Tenenbaum Program on Fact-Based Policy. Bruce Cain is a political scientist. He's the head of the Bill Lane Center for the American West here at Stanford. How long have you known Bill, and do you guys agree on national politics?
Well, I've known Bruce for a very long time because he's one of the venerated professors in the political science area. And he's also got the credential of having worked in some practical politics in his misspent youth. I say misspent because he and I do not agree on many a policy. But I always think that my arguments are sharpened a great deal from running them by Bruce, who does have a great knowledge of American politics.
Yeah, so one of the things you guys talk about in there are standards of reliability. So you're trying to increase confidence and trust in American elections. And one of the things I like is prompt reporting of election results. You think that's an important idea. So that's why I want to switch to Florida here. Florida now is able to, on election night, say, this is who won. We know that that's who won. What is it that Florida does differently than other states when it comes to early voting or mail-in voting?
Well, among the battleground states that we hear about, it does two things extremely well because of the way its laws are written. Number one, absentee ballots can be pre-processed. Mail-in ballots can be pre-processed when they come in, which means there is a check on who the voter is, whether their address is correct, all the formulas of Florida law for verifying the vote.
Signature verification, too.
Signature verification. Some states have signatures. Some states have numerical digits. In the age when our kids in school aren't really taught penmanship, digits have some benefits as a way to check. But the checks on who the voter says he or she is all done before the election. And then the ballots are prepared so they can be counted on election day along with people who vote on election.
So processing and counting are different things.
Processing and counting are different things. There are two states that we read a lot about in 2020, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, that do not allow the pre-processing of absentee ballots, which means that election officials have to pre-process, check the reliability and veracity of the voters' identification on election day and then count. Because there's so much else to do on election day and because pre-processing or the processing of ballots is a time-consuming enterprise, it takes a while. And so that's why those two states were not able to get their results in non-prompt basis.
Looking into some issues to ask you about this, I'm realizing there's a difference between in-person voting and mail-in voting. They're not one for one, right? And Florida you can't vote early 3 days before the election. They allow early voting, and then they stop that in order to count those votes. And when it comes to actual mail-in ballots, Florida ballots, they have to receive them by the day of the election.
Yes, that's the second major thing Florida does that allows them to get prompt election results. They do require absentee ballots to be in on election.
Right.
All mail-in ballots will be in on election day. And there are many other states, including the ones you remember from 2020, who were causing some of the problems in the timeliness of their results, who do have deadlines for extending the receipt of ballots. And so that can slow it down.
Yeah, so I went and looked this up. The National Conference on State Legislatures, their website has a
Excellent resource.
Excellent. They have great tables on all different kinds of election rules, and then you can just go look for your state. Winner ballots will have to be processed, counted, mail-in ballots, all the rest of it. So 30 other states, not just Florida, 30 other states require ballots, mail-in ballots, to be in by election day. 20 states and the District of Columbia do not. And I mean, that makes sense for Alaska, right? Your people live pretty far away, and they use planes to get away around instead of cars. And I guess that's always up to the state. So that's Florida. I want to run through the battleground states. So I went to Real Clear Politics. Let's pull up the battleground states. Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin all require their mail-in ballots to be in on election day. Only Nevada of the battleground states.
Well, I think Pennsylvania has a 3-day deadline.
3-day deadline. Oh, they've changed it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll
Supreme Court case.
Supreme Court case. I was going to ask about that too. So let's go through. I mean, Arizona, and actually Arizona is a harder one because they had some issues in 2020 as well. But Arizona allows processing and counting to begin upon receipt. So when they get those mail-in ballots in, they're allowed to verify them and then count them. And I'll note all of these states have laws that are written where results cannot be reported early, right? It is a felony. In Michigan, if you have early access, you have to swear an oath that you won't report these things. So Arizona does that. Arizona, Biden took it by 0.3 percentage points in 2020. Right now, Trump has a 4.5% lead at this moment. So maybe that one, we'll get back to what happened there and if that one will be called on the night of or later. Georgia, signature upon receipt, counting 18 days before the election day. There's a couple more details there, but Biden only won that one by 11,000 votes, 0.2%. Trump's got a little bit of a lead, 4% right now, so we'll see again on that night. But then I think we get into the interesting battleground states. You mentioned Michigan last time. Michigan, it only allows processing of ballots starting at 7 a.m. on election day, and then counting of ballots right after that at 7 a.m. on election day. And Biden took that one by 2.5%, but right now Trump's up 3%. Do you think it's likely that come November, this fall, Michigan's going to need to wait another couple of days? I mean, in 2020, they had to wait till November 5th to actually call the election in Michigan for
Well, they might. Look, one of the other variables in the law is how close to election day people can drop off mail-in ballots.
Okay.
And so one of the things that happened in Arizona in 2020 and in 2022 is that they allow absentee ballots to be dropped off on election day. So there was a deluge of absentee ballots, which slowed things down in the counting in the precincts. Some states allow the counting of absentee ballots in precincts. That means that they can get overwhelmed. Other places have central counting locations for absentee ballots so that election officials can pretty well anticipate the flow of absentee ballots because they know how many went out and have historic percentages of how many are returned. And so they can staff up accordingly. So Milwaukee, for example, was able to get its absentee ballots counted in a pretty timely fashion because they have a central count for absentees.
So you mentioned Milwaukee. Minnesota, verification, this is interesting to me. Again, the states are all different. All different. Verification of signatures of the ballots, okay. Upon receipt, after close of business on the 19th day before the election, fine. The ballots can be opened, put into a ballot box, but not counted yet. Counting for Minnesota begins after the polls close on election day. So you're saying Minnesota had a centralized counting area and they were able to, even though all their mail-in ballots, you had to wait until polls closed. Then
Milwaukee, I'm not sure.
Milwaukee, okay.
Minnesota. Minnesota, also interestingly enough, is a state that does not have signature requirements. It has digit matches. So the whole process becomes somewhat less complicated with matching digits.
So when you say digits, you literally mean
Numbers. They got random set of numbers.
You do. So on the envelope and on your ballot.
Yep.
Okay. Big question. Why don't all states do this versus signature verification? I know it's a dicey topic among election officials, right?
Well, it's not so much among election officials. Fierce federalism has always been the practice of the country. We do believe and have always believed that local officials making local decisions is kind of the best way to go, that one size does not fit all, that what may be right for the way Arizona counts is not going to be right for the way New York counts, and a smaller state like North Dakota is not going to want to do it the way Florida does. So we do believe in local control, and we do not think that one size fits all. There are problems in that, but that's also the historical glory of why we have 10,000 separate election jurisdictions in the country.
And that's because, I mean, some people might look at the elections, especially 2020 contested election, is just not good for the country and say, why doesn't the federal government regulate this stuff? And it's just because of our federal system that's unlikely to change. Is anyone pushing for it to be regulated federally?
There have been some bills that were passed, largely a Democratic effort called the We the People Act. They tried to federalize all the rules for at least federal elections. Now, what was interesting about that effort was that it would have a lot of standards that would be uniform across the country for federal elections. It would have set up a system for federal elections and a separate set of rules for state elections that would have been pretty messy. But in that drive to federalize, local election officials generally opposed it because, like, the feds didn't ask the states for their input. Mm-hmm. And what I believe from working with local election officials, they would have said is one size does not fit all. And you can't think just because you're a smart person sitting in Washington that you have an answer that's going to work throughout the diversity of jurisdictions in the country.
But what do you think about the idea of let's set the standards and then you guys figure out how? It is we need to make sure that there is prompt reporting, that that people have confidence in elections. Is there a set of standards you think that you could say, here are the minimums, you figure out the details?
I don't think you can do it for all the 50 states. I do believe that under the principles of federalism, individual states could set more standards for the jurisdictions within their states. Mm. But I don't think you want New York and South Dakota operating their elections the same way with a similar standard.
Fair enough. Let's keep going on some battleground states because I want to preview 2024 and give people a picture in their head of what might this look like. I want them to not be surprised if, again, votes take a little bit to be counted. So Nevada, signature verification upon receipt, counting 15 days before the election. They should probably be able to call their election the night of. What do you think?
Well, maybe. It depends how many mail-in ballots they get on election day. It depends if there are breakdowns that occur in jurisdictions, which does happen. I mean, the thing to remember about our election system, in addition to the multiple jurisdictions we have, is that we make it a very human process, that there are probably 1 million volunteers. Many of them are even older than me. And because of that, the system is subject to human mistakes. There are safeguards in it, so ultimately the results are accurate. But it is not a machine built for precision. It is a machine built for local communities to be able to do things the way they think they should have done.
And there's a lot of redundancy built into the system, right? I mean, we do elections a lot in America. I feel like if there were untoward things happening, people have moved to correct them.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. I think one of the things we're doing here at Hoover is cataloging all the safeguards in the different phases of the election system to, again, provide more confidence for voters and citizens that the results are ultimately accurate. That there are mistakes made, and there will be mistakes made. There are also procedures to correct that.
let's talk North Carolina for a second. North Carolina was interesting. They're allowed to begin processing before the election day. It's the 5th Tuesday before election day, counting 5 p.m. on election day. But if they pass a resolution 2 weeks before that, they're allowed to start counting at 2 p.m., which is fascinating. I haven't read any other state that's got that. Within this day, we'll move it. We'll start a couple hours earlier. Pennsylvania, you mentioned. Pennsylvania is an interesting one. Again, processing and counting 7 a.m. on election day. And there were some things that you mentioned might have changed. Now, we got the Supreme Court case. In 2020, there were some last-minute changes to their election rules. Can you take me through that a little bit?
Yeah, or attempts to. There was a suit against the Pennsylvania law that allowed absentee ballots to be received as long as postmarked by election day up to 3 days after the election. Ultimately, the Supreme Court did not strike that down. It's been a subject of continuing litigation on whether that should be allowed. That is a sort of familiar theme among states that do allow the receipt of absentee ballots postmarked on election day, and up to varying dates afterwards. All about what you pointed out, the prompt delivery of election results.
Right.
So pre-processing is something that the Republicans in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin have stopped from happening because they feared that there would be the premature release of results, and that would create an electoral momentum. There have also been delays in results in states that allow mail-in ballots to be received in long periods afterwards. I mean, we may remember a couple of congressional elections in recent years in New York and California. You have very lenient deadlines.
Yeah, California is a long time. Yeah.
Long time. So imagine if New York and California were the outcome determinant state for a presidential election, and you couldn't call it because it was a close election and there were lots of absentee ballots out, or even seats in Congress, which is where those delays really.
I was going to say more likely to happen, considering California and New York, we kind of know who they're going to go for in a presidential election, but actual, how.
Each has a number of contesting congressional districts.
Right. The fears over pre-release numbers, has that happened in a federal state? So, okay, so that's just the justification, but it hasn't happened yet. I mean, it's quite a felony if you were to maybe even falsely release early poll numbers.
Yeah, it's a felony. It's not clear who it would actually advantage if somebody went and released the ballots early. It would be really in nobody's interest for it to happen. Election officials, it's a mark to election officials' integrity that there are no instances of the pre-release results, even if there's pre-processing the ballots. So in a way, it seems like it's a measure designed to sow sort of distrust and unease in the electoral system.
Wisconsin's the last battleground state I mentioned, processing after polls open on election day and counting after polls open on election day. So as soon as things kick off, then they'll take the collection of mail-in ballots and go from there. Biden won it by 0.6 percentage points right now. Trump on Real Clear Politics is up 1 percentage point. So, part of the motivation of the Tenenbaum program on fact-based policy is to try and give people an understanding of how to go find the truth. They wonder about how these things work. And part of finding the truth is making predictions and then testing them. So I'm looking at here Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, maybe Michigan, although Trump seems to have a bigger lead there. Would you, 2020, we waited a couple days or longer to find out who won these states. Do you think 2024 we're going to know the night of?
Oh, probably not under the way the rules are currently written.
Really?
But you do know the night of if there's a big margin for one of the candidates. Where you don't know is if it's really narrow. So, there will be wily political operatives sitting looking at expected vote totals for all precincts, and they'll weigh those against the results that are coming in. Some precincts are a better indication of what will happen statewide than others. And so that's how not only the campaigns, but also news outlets who do the predicting will take a look at results. So if it's a narrow margin in a state, then results are going to take longer to come in.
Okay, here's the question. North Carolina's got that funny 5 p.m. Maybe we can start counting at 2 p.m. Who's actually in charge of these decisions when you process, when you count? Someone wants to look at their state and say, this doesn't make any sense. We should probably count earlier just so we can call this. Is it just state legislatures, or are state Supreme Courts going to weigh in as well?
It is unlikely that state Supreme Courts will weigh in at this point, just because it's close enough to the election.
Okay.
Courts weighing in are generally thought to cause confusion.
Like Pennsylvania in 2020.
Yeah, there's a U.S. Supreme Court doctrine called the Purcell Doctrine that says if it's close to Election Day and going to cause voter confusion, then courts should not weigh. Supreme Court has applied it to itself more when it doesn't want to take a case, but that is still a sort of facet of when the courts weigh. But you ask the question, is it legislatures or is it administrative offices who do it? And the answer is that's part of the fierce federalism, and it varies from state to state. If a state legislature has a very specific law that says you can or cannot do it, then that trumps what an administrative agency can do. But there are state laws, and I know you'll be shocked to hear this, there are state laws that are subject to more than one interpretation, and that's where administrators jump into the booth.
That's tough.
Yeah, and then legislators sometimes agree with the administrative decision, don't, so the litigation spiral.
Right. I want to ask about Maricopa County in Arizona. It's one of these counties that I think most counties that people would know in America are named after major metropolitan cities, but many people now know Maricopa County. And that's because of 2020, and you mentioned 2022 as well. Even though they were able to process and count votes as soon as they came in, they got a deluge of in-person, of people dropping off ballots.
Yeah.
Was that early voting? Was that mail-in voting? What? They're different things, right?
Well, there are different names for it,
right?
But that's not consistent among states either. So that in some instances, that would be considered in-person voting to drop off mail-in ballots.
Mm-hmm.
In other places, that would be considered mail voting, so treated differently.
Would that have been allowed in Florida to take a mail-in ballot and show up the day of the election and drop them off? I think they might be allowed in some county, some specific areas, but not at regular polling places, right? Because they stop early voting 3 days before in order to count.
That is one of those things where you go to the law books and look it up to be sure.
Okay. Early voting, 2020 was different than 2024. We were in the depths of COVID. The GOP was clearly against it because it looked like Democrats would benefit from it more than them. Is that changing now in 2024? Or is there a partisan group now that's more for, they still want to return to all in-person voting versus mail-in voting?
You need to distinguish between mail voting, which is pre-election voting, and in-person early voting. Republicans have never had an issue over the last 2 years with in-person early voting, on the theory that if a voter has to go into a polling place and present their ID or register somehow, that's not subject to improper and illegal voting. With mail voting, that's where the controversy has occurred. There have been periods of time in which the Republican mail voting programs were just vastly superior and won a lot of elections to Republicans. The Republican Party is an older party than the Democratic Party. As an intuitive matter, mail-in voting should be something Republicans embrace. And so they ran into a bit of a problem with the charges that mail-in voting was bad and elections rigged in mail-in voting. There is now, and there have been numerous articles written about this, a real push by Republican political operatives to encourage mail-in voting by its supporters. You want to have votes in the bank on election day. Bad weather or something with the kids can't get in the way of your people casting their votes because they already have. It is a much sort of more solid political practice to encourage people to vote by mail. You save money because you don't have to turn out people because you know that they've already voted. So there are all sorts of reasons now where there's a push within GOP circles to encourage mail voting. That is also true about half the time in the statements of Donald Trump, which is causing a bit of a disconnect between some Republican state parties, like Pennsylvania in particular, and what's coming out of the presidential candidates.
Utah does all mail-in voting.
9 states.
9 states do, all completely mail-in. As in, you can vote in person, you can come drop it off, but all ballots are mailed out.
Yeah.
All right, so we have evidence that this can work.
Well, one of the things that Bruce Cain and I address in the paper is the ballot harvesting issue.
Yeah, and are there many different definitions of that? Tell me what ballot harvesting really means.
Some states allow one person to collect multiple ballots and turn them in. Other states who want to prohibit that ballot harvesting process do not allow someone else to turn in multiple ballots. So there's ballot harvesting, which can be a problem, right? You sort of intuitively think that the classic case is going through nursing homes and collecting ballots, and maybe not everybody in the nursing home is actually voting their own ballot. So that's an issue worth trying to draw some rules around. The other thing to note about those 9 states with mail-in voting is that every voter in the state gets a ballot, a live ballot, and can turn it in. That raises suspicions that funny things can happen to ballots. And so in the other states, which I personally think is a better practice, and I think Bruce would actually agree with me on this, but it is a better practice to mail a mail-in ballot application to everyone.
Okay.
Make the voter sort of verify who they are, some form of identification, signature, numerical identifier. And then once that application for an absentee ballot has been received, then you mail them a ballot.
I was going to ask about that because some states just mail all ballots out. Some you need an excuse, and some you need no excuse to get a ballot.
The glories of federalism.
The glories of federalism. Bigger picture, are there any states that had trouble in 2020 that you think, okay, they're going to be fine in 2024 based on rules they've changed?
Well,
has anyone had like the Florida revitalization of, well, we had issues in 2000 and now it's
not really among the battleground states. I mean, there are certainly different laws that have been put into effect, which may engender greater voter confidence. Although these days, in the contentious atmosphere and dialogue over elections, that confidence in elections seems to come down to whether your candidate wins or not.
Are there really good data sources that you wish people would check or look at? I mean, you are exposed to so many election officials. You are exposed to people who are skeptical of elections. That's what you're doing a lot of the time, is trying to convey confidence and here's how we make sure and safeguard these elections. Are there places you wish people would go and look? Are there really good data sources that you can point people to?
Well, it all depends what the curiosity that people have is. What's really interesting in the polling that's been done of voters and voter attitudes is that people seem to have the greatest degree of faith in their own local elections, and they think they're voting. There's a little more skepticism statewide. In other words, people in rural areas tend to point to the big cities and say, I know there's something nefarious going on there.
Yeah.
And then people have even less confidence in the elections in other states. And so it is difficult enough for people to come up with a real set of knowledge about their own state laws, let alone a number of other state laws. So for people who do want to feel reassured about the election system, I think going to the National Conference of State Legislatures site, the ncsl.org tonight, can be helpful in getting that information. Looking at the different safeguards that are in the systems, there are very few different voting systems in the country. So chances are that the voting machines that people vote on, where they have competence in their own local elections, are probably the same machines that are used in the states in which they do not have competence. So that's a bit of a disconnect. And I think that information would be helpful to give people some more confidence in elections.
Is there a most common myth that you get about elections, or is there an accusation you've heard about elections are fraudulent, stolen, that you think this isn't true because?
Well, I think the common myth that elections are rigged should be belied by the fact that there's been no evidence uncovered, despite decades of looking, that elections are rigged. When I worked for 4 years for the national party committees, we always had election day operations. So did many outside groups, all looking for problems in the election. You have to be honest about the evidence. And in any collection of the fraud that's been uncovered, it usually is one-offs involving individual people. There are some instances, like a problem with a congressional election in North Carolina in 2018, where a Republican was actually convicted of voter fraud through violating the ballot harvesting laws. But the basic point is that there is no evidence that's been accumulated to show systematic fraud that would overturn the results of an election. It is a human system. There will be mistakes. There are some bad actors who may try something, but there are safeguards in the system so that if there is fraud, you got to be able to produce the evidence. And there were 64 post-election suits filed in 2000, none of which were successful in showing any sort of problems with the election that would have changed the results.
So to say it another way, it's in the interest of each party to look for fraud committed by the other party and then expose it as well. I mean, that's another check on the system, wouldn't you say?
Yes. I mean, look, I think that the poll watcher rules that do allow the political parties and candidates to have observers in every polling place in the country is really important. The Trump campaign and the RNC, Republican National Committee, just announced that they would have 100,000 poll watcher program. That is a positive development.
Yeah.
They should be, observers from both parties should be in every polling place. If they find problems, that's got to be corrected. And if they don't, that is a point of validation of the accuracy of the election.
Yeah, through your work with EOLDN and other efforts here at Hoover, I've gotten to meet various county commissioners, recorders, and election people all around the country on the right and the left. And it's striking to me how much they just want elections to be run smoothly. It is I wouldn't say a completely volunteer thing, but it's not a money-making business for them. It is a stressful, almost contact sport at this point, profession. And they are very dedicated to making sure these elections go off smoothly and that there isn't fraud. I mean, this is the American system.
They're government employees who feel a civic obligation to make sure our elections come out right. And that's a really key point to remember. They are your friends and neighbors who happen to work in elections. When you bring in all the volunteers that the election officials recruit to help out with the elections, it's even more true that it's a local enterprise with absolutely well-intentioned people to let the voice of the voters be heard.
Where would you send people if they actually wanted to volunteer, if they were skeptical or just wanted to help out and said, you know what, I'm going to go be a part of this and volunteer and see how these things run?
I think the places that are most interesting for that are the battleground states you mentioned at the beginning. there will be jurisdictions that have contested U.S. Senate and U.S. House races, and also very important. There is a cautionary note in there, which that each state also has its own laws about whether you have to be a resident of that state to be a poll watcher.
So maybe start local. Right.
So starting local is good. Look, the national party committees and a number of 501c groups all have election observer programs. And if you have doubts, it really, you should get involved, and you should go into polling places and look for yourself.
Ben, thank you. Let me see if we can recap this a little bit, and if we figured this out enough. States have different rules based on when you can send in ballots, when they need to be received, when they can be processed, when they can be counted. So every state's a little bit different. I would say if elections are close, you're expecting it to take longer to call for a state.
Yes.
All right. And then it's up to maybe state legislatures or maybe administrators to change these rules if you think we should be counting earlier or later, or we should, keep them where they are.
Yeah, legislative efforts on both fronts have either been successful at this point or are not going to be successful at this point. So I think the rules that are in place now are really likely to be the rules in place on Election Day 2024.
All right, so if we want to change the rules, wait until the election and then go out and push and make that difference.
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Look at what went wrong and what went right in 2024 and improve your own state and jurisdiction's ways of running elections.
Ben, thank you for teaching me more about elections.
Thanks, Matt.
If you want to hear more from Ben Ginsberg, I strongly encourage you to go listen to Saints, Sinners, and Salvageables, his excellent podcast on election-related issues. He covers issues like we covered today and many more with people from around the country, from the right and the left. It's hosted here at the Hoover Institution. If you'd like to follow me, you can do that at Twitter at Tom P. Church. Please follow the Hoover Institution at HooverInst, that's INST, over at Twitter as well. If you have questions that we didn't answer today, please put them in the comments, ask them, and we will try to address them in a future episode. And as always, check the show notes to look through the links or other issues that we covered today that I will make sure we go into more detail. Thank you very much for listening and watching. We'll talk to you next time.